All right, let's talk about number 36, which is solving a quadratic equation, which means the highest power you see is 2, by factoring. So whenever you're trying to solve something by factoring, you're using something called the zero product property, which means you want two things that multiply together and equal 0. And if that's the case, then either one of them could be 0 or both. So when we're solving by factoring, the very first thing you want to do is make sure that your equation equals 0. Now in this case, it does, but if you looked at number 34, it doesn't. So you'd have to move everything to the same side on number 34. Now, on this one, we're good to go. So I find when I'm solving by factoring, it's useful to get it in what's called descending order, meaning the powers on the variables need to go down. So I'm going to put that 3b squared first, and then 6b, and then 3 equals 0. Now, we're going to factor this. And the first thing I always like to do when I factor is to try to see, is there a greatest common factor? Is there something that goes evenly into everything of those terms? And the answer to this is yes. There's a 3 in each of those terms. So I'm going to undistribute that 3. I'm going to factor it out to make my rest of my factorization easier. So I'm going to write it out in front of some parentheses and basically pull it out, undistribute it. When I take a 3 away from 3b squared, it's b squared. When I take a 3 away from 6b, it's 2b. When I take a 3 away from 3, it's 1. Now I can focus on factoring this b squared plus 2b plus 1. And if you remember from Algebra 1, and you did some of this in geometry last year as well, we want two numbers that multiply to give me 1, that add to give me 2. And those two numbers are 1 and 1. So this part in here, the b squared plus 2b plus 1, will break up into b plus 1 and b plus 1. That 3 that was sitting out in front stays there. Now we're ready, because we have things that are multiplied by each other and they equal 0, we're ready to use the zero product property. Now, what that means is we can set each of those things that are being multiplied equal to 0. So 3 could equal 0, b plus 1 could equal 0, or b plus 1 could equal 0. Now, this first thing, 3 equals 0, that's clearly never true. So that's not going to give us any answers, because there are no answers for which that works. b plus 1 can equal 0 when b is negative 1. Same thing for this one. Now, you could just write as your answer that b is negative 1. Technically, and we're going to learn about this here, what this means is the negative 1 is a solution, but it occurs twice. So I like to go ahead and write it twice to emphasize that we actually have two answers that just happen to be the same. That's it for that.